But you're looking at me like there's been some breaking news.
There's some massive nuclear college football breaking news. Robert, can you hit the breaking news sounder real quick?
I don't need to do the Blaine noise. I need to do the action.
No, the Blaine, that's reserved for Blaine and Mickey. Yeah.
Breaking sports news on 104.5 The Zone.
This per John Wilner at Wilner Hotline on Twitter. Pac-12 Hotline. Source, USC and UCLA are planning to leave for the Big Ten as early as 2024. Move, asterisk, he says, has not been finalized at the highest levels of power. What the heck? USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, reportedly, as early as 2024. That to me is a moment, Lucas, where I'm double checking if this is a fake account. But this is a verified account. And Stuart Mandel now quote tweeting it, saying, "Not a fire drill." John, the writer that is reporting this, would know.
John Wilner of Pac-12 Hotline.
Holy crap, man.
Yeah, I feel like that puts a nail in the coffin of the Pac-12, right? Like, who are you tuning in to watch Pac-12 now for, if that's true?
You're not.
We're talking about completely reorganizing the entire composition of college football now. Oklahoma and Texas moving from the Big 12 to the SEC is one thing. USC and UCLA being two of the marquee programs in the in the Pac-12 rather, moving to the Big 10, you could argue is a more seismic move in the grand scheme of things when it comes to conference realignment than Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC. Oklahoma and Texas are the two bona fide best programs in the Big 12, moving to what is already the best conference in college football. USC and UCLA are two of the highest profile programs in the Pac-12, a recently perpetually weak Power 5 conference, and moving to the Big 10 to try and compete with the SEC. This is the Big 10 trying to keep up with the SEC.
So much for the alliance. The supposed alliance between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. How does the alliance feel about this? That's my question, is that these are two conferences that are supposed to be working together against the SEC, against what the SEC and ACC have together. And historically, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have been partners because they have similar academic standards. And now Stuart Mandel is writing this as I say this, writing on Twitter at SI Mandel. Maybe the alliance should have gotten that thing in writing after all. Like, those are two conferences that have a long history together and kind of collaborating and at least going against what the SEC and the ACC are trying to build on the other side of the country. And this just absolutely spits in the face of that if you're UCLA and USC. Those are the two biggest brands outside of perhaps Oregon in the Pac-12 gone from the Pac-12. I can't even comprehend this news because this feels so far out of the realm of possibility of what could have still happened hypothetically before this and realignment this summer.
Who does this benefit more, the Big Ten or USC and UCLA?
I think it's a good question. I
mean, you're talking about a tougher path to the playoff for USC and Lincoln Riley.
Very much so. Hey, look, I think the Pac-12 has consistently been the odd conference out in college football playoffs. And so now USC, instead of saying, let's make an easy path to come to the college football playoff through the Pac-12, let's challenge ourselves and say that the conference that we are currently in gives us very little margin for error to lose one game and still make our way to the Final Four. It's interesting. And Mike Golick Jr. tweets this a minute ago, and I think this is the logical next step. It's your move, Clemson. It's your move. Clemson is the other major power now that is going to look around and see themselves left out of realignment because the ACC is not the way forward for them. Now I think they're trying to find a way to get into the SEC. I think that's the logical next step, is that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be the two super conferences.
Massive news in the college football landscape just minutes ago from John Wilner. USC and UCLA reportedly planning to leave for the Big Ten as early as 2024. Michael Burgett on the Zone TV chat says, who would have thought the Big 12 would be in a better position than the Pac-12? If you were writing up the first Power 5 conference to fall to the wayside, it was the Big 12.
I don't know if they're in a better position. I just think that every position behind the SEC, the Big 10, is kind of the same right now. Like the ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12 are kind of all in the same spot. I don't think there's a hierarchy after the
I
Big
think
10
the
and
Pac-12
SEC.
was in a weaker spot than the ACC last season. The Pac-12 has been in a weaker spot than the ACC for quite a few years.
But
you're talking about Oregon and Utah being the only relevant programs in that conference. Last season, USC won 4 games last season.
in football, yeah.
We're talking about football here.
And everything combined, Stanford is still the gold standard of athletics in totality. Pac-12 definitely is not the quote-unquote conference of champions anymore.
Certainly not. 615-737-1045. Again, USC and UCLA reportedly planning to leave for the Big Ten as early as 2024. We go to Chris in Lebanon. Hello, Chris.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. You know, I listened to what you just said, and I would say Oregon and Utah are going to have to probably move to the Big Ten too. But, you know, the Rose Bowl committee has been the most obstinate about being in a playoff situation. And they always want a Big Ten and a Pac-12 team in their game. And the game is played where UCLA plays their home games. So what does this do for the Rose Bowl? It's ridiculous.
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah. I mean, the ripple effects of this are so far and wide. You're talking about emergency calls happening at this moment right now with Greg Sankey, with commissioners of every Power 5 conference in the country. James Ashley on the Zone TV chat. The future would be to merge the SEC and ACC into just the SEC.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we're moving towards at this point. I mean, it is going to become the money and the style of brands that you are going to have with the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be completely different than everybody else. It's just the fact of the matter now. The Rose Bowl's role in this is fascinating, and that is a wonderful point because the Rose Bowl has been the biggest obstacle in the way of college football playoff expansion and the biggest obstacle in us as fans not having to watch playoff games on New Year's Eve, which is one of the most ridiculous things that college football has going for it right now. So I think that this also is going to speed up the process of expansion, not just because the Rose Bowl is now kind of out of the picture, because I don't know how they react to this, but this gives more control to the SEC, the Big Ten, to set the narrative for everyone else and say either join us or get left behind. Your piece of the pie is going to be considerably smaller if you don't come and join us on either of our conferences. Unbelievable.
If you thought the arms race in college football had heated up,
Man.
USC and UCLA just dumped a gallon of gasoline onto the fire. Michael says, the reason I say the Big 12 is in a better position than the Pac-12 is there are schools moving to the Big 12. Who's moving to the Pac-12?
Well, that's the thing, and that's the point I'm making too, is that they're just 1 year ahead. I don't know if that makes it better. The schools moving to the Big 12, you know, you have it's BYU, Houston. Correct me if I'm wrong. Who else is
BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, UCF.
That's right.
And UCF.
I knew I was leaving somebody out there because there were 4 of them total.
They go from the AAC to the Big 12. The AAC acquires a few schools, UAB included, leaving from Conference USA.
I mean, the Pac-12 will now do the exact same thing. It's just going to happen a year later. I don't know if I don't know what options they're going to have. I mean, you're looking at probably Boise State, probably is the first call you make when you think about teams that have been on the outside looking in a little bit.
Boise State's is certainly a good one to throw out there.
I mean, I
don't know. I was going to say Fresno State. I mean, you're just grasping at straws.
Yeah, literally.
If you're the Pac-12.
Yeah, you're going to end up having the same G5 conferences are going to be called different things is the way realignment works.
Well, the G7?
Literally. I mean, it's going to be the Power 2 at the end of the day. Man. I mean, this is not even something that we could talk about, like, you know, hypothetically as an off-season topic of like, hey, what would happen if, like, this isn't even within the realm of hypotheticals that we would discuss.
Well, we're talking about the Power 5 no longer being a thing. It will no longer be the Power 5. It won't be long before that's just not something that you can say in modern college football. It'll be the Power 2, the Power 3. However it's rearranged, you're leaving the Power 5 era of college football behind with these moves. And you know what? You probably were with Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC. I mean, the magnitude of those two programs leaving the Big 12 compared to what the Big 12 is acquiring to replace them, we were already set onto that path. I just don't think anybody expected something this seismic this soon.
This is an equally seismic move as to what the SEC did a year ago with Texas and Oklahoma. No question.
Oh, easily. Think about it geographically.
Right. It changes the rules of the way these conferences can align geographically, which had already been changed, obviously, with, West Virginia making the move that it made and Nebraska making the move originally and the kind of the original shift a few years ago, obviously, from the Big 12 to the Big 10. But look, I mean, I think the most important calls being made right now, and the biggest brand left in the Pac-12 is Oregon and Phil Knight and Nike. And the way that brand is now being left in the dust, it's not something that Oregon wants to find themselves in. I think the most panicked person right now is Oregon.
Yeah, who is scrambling more than Oregon and the defending Pac-12 champion Utah Utes?
And I'll tell you who is the happiest man right now is Mario Cristobal, that he got out of Eugene, Oregon, while he still had the opportunity to be relevant and go to his alma mater and go to Miami. Point. Because now you're looking at a situation where the traditional powers of the ACC are going to be angling themselves for a trip to the SEC. And I'm telling you, Barton Simmons at Vanderbilt just tweeted out the exact same thing. Former 247 analyst just said Power 2 is all he said on Twitter. That's what we're moving
That's what
towards.
it is, yeah.
It's going to be the Power 2 conferences.
615-737-1045, reacting to the blockbuster news reported by John Wilner that USC and UCLA are reportedly planning to join the Big Ten in 2024. By the way, comparing timelines, you're talking about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC 2025 at the latest. The Big 12 has been firm on that. They want Texas and Oklahoma to honor those contracts.
Not anymore.
This throws everything out of whack.
There is no chance that Texas and Oklahoma are not in the SEC in 2024 if USC and UCLA are in the Big Ten in 2024.
Okay, so you mentioned Power 2. You saw Barton Simmons, general manager at Vanderbilt football, tweeting out Power 2. So, okay, the one conference we haven't talked about in this is the ACC. Healthy amount of turnover might be coming to the ACC, coaching turnover, that is.
Sure.
Here in 2022. When you think about guys like Mike Norvell, like Jeff Collins, like Scott Satterfield at Louisville, that could very well be facing the hot seat in 2022. This was going to be a pivotal year for the ACC no matter what, just on the football field.
Yeah.
But now the pressure has completely skyrocketed. And if you're the commissioner of the ACC today, what can you even do? What phone calls do you even make today?
Your first calls are to the bottom half of the Big Ten that now got a little bit more scared that they're lost in the shuffle even more.
So that would be Rutgers. That would be...
I mean, if I'm Jim Phillips, I'm calling App State. I'm calling ECU. I'm calling anybody on the East Coast that's in the AAC that has a brand. Because you can't just bring these unknown guys into a conference and expect. And the ACC, by the way, is dealing with a myriad of small issues. They're in the process of moving their headquarters out of small Greensboro to a larger airport region like Charlotte. They've got, I said, just a ton of problems. They're still negotiating with Notre Dame, trying to get them to come in to not be just a single sport participant. They want them to come in fully. So the ACC's got their own problems without ever losing a member. They're in the problem now of having to add people that aren't just to add them, so you have a million Boston colleges in the conference.
I think what the Big Ten and the ACC, I think what the ACC is doing is they're calling Maryland. I think they're calling Northwestern. I think they're calling Rutgers. I think they're calling Indiana, possibly. I think they're looking for major markets where they can now plant their flag, Chicago being one of them with Northwestern. Obviously, it's not a football powerhouse, so to speak, but you are looking for major markets to save you right now.
But it's still a helpless situation because all those programs you just listed, you're not holding a candle to what you're looking at now with the Big Ten and the SEC.
And then at the end of the day, you almost have another iteration of the Big East that might just become the ACC.
Yeah.
I think what the ACC is going to try to do is they're going to try to double down on making it be a dominant college basketball conference, which is what they have done. I mean, that's what they've done with Louisville, with Syracuse, with the teams that they have added within their conference over the past couple phases of realignment. But that's not a moneymaker like college football is, obviously.
Michael brings it up on the Zone TV chat. And by the way, 615-737-1045 if you want to chime in on the bombshell that USC and UCLA are reportedly headed to the Big Ten. Michael says, it was brought up yesterday, the new Big 12 commissioner coming from Rock Nation is even more a way to keep ahead of this situation.
Yeah.
That was some news that really went under the radar to me because that was big news that Brett Yormark comes over from Rock Nation, Jay-Z sports agency, to be the next commissioner of the Big 12, replacing Bob Bowlesby, who announced his retirement a few months ago. Don't know what kind of wrench that throws into the negotiations between the Big 12 and Texas and Oklahoma as far as departing those contracts early to join the SEC earlier. But that is a key cog in all of this, is the Big 12 named a new commissioner a couple of days ago. The press release, I think, was literally 2 days ago.
Yeah, it was.
So D. Good says, what do you call the Big 10 now? It was already the Big 14.
The big conference. The large 16, 14. I mean, no. Where does Notre Dame fall in this?
Yeah, another great.
Is Notre Dame off to the Big Ten now in all these sports?
You talk about phone calls the ACC is making.
Well, see, they have
the first
the
one.
ACC has exclusive rights with Notre Dame when they sign the contract of being a one sport participant.
Yeah.
So if they are signing
Right.
with anyone, they have to sign with the ACC or buy themselves out of the contract, which is a massive contract. So like ACC did a very good job of making sure Notre Dame can only play with us.
Yeah.
Unless something happens with the contract.
Couple more reports quickly before we go to break. Darren Ravel saying, hearing nothing is signed on USC, UCLA. Some Big Ten athletic directors didn't even know. And then Pat Forty says, confirming Ross's confirmation of John Wilner's report. That was a report from Ross Dellinger that he is confirming. So a confirmation of the confirmation.
We are confirming confirmations.
Breaking on what we are confirming the confirmation of the confirmation here on 104.5 The Zone. Pat Forty writing, preparations are being made. Nothing official is yet. I love this ridiculous world that we live in. 615-737-1045.
Join